All right, congratulations, Daniel and Dosher. No one's approached me yet. It's a Mazda. I could use another car. All right, our next plenary panel. ESG, Sustainability and Green Supply Chains. Please welcome to the stage our moderator, Dr. Grace Sosich, Senior Vice Dean for Faculty and Academic Affairs, USC Marshall. She'll come up and introduce the rest of her panel. Let's give them a warm welcome to the stage. There is a question. I'll write it for you.
But they told me to read the back, so I don't have it. I know that there was a question.
Okay, I'll get it.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's nice to see all of these faces here. So I cannot believe this is the 12th time we are doing this. I remember when we had the first annual summit, it sounded fun that year because it was first annual, but now when it's 12th annual, it's kind of nicer to say. So I've been moderating several of these sustainability panels throughout the years here. And as I remember, those first years, sustainability was mentioned usually only during our panel, not really in other sessions. So it was really nice today to hear how sustainability came up in every of the sessions. Like it's really becoming something that that companies are paying more attention to. And so I'm really excited that we have such a great panel here. I think this is actually one of the most numerous panels because we have 6 great people here who will share some of their experiences with you. So to go alphabetically, so first, our first panelist is Jack Branny from Project 44. You have opportunity to hear from the CEO a little bit earlier in the fire chat with Nick, but Jack will talk to us about sustainability. Our next panelist is Karen Eng from CSMI. Then we have Brandon Frank from Pacific Packaging Components. So I am not sure, I don't see the person who is next on my list, John Kessler from Sunstone Management. Oh, sorry about that. Then we have Nicole Mao from our consulting. And last but not least, Bonnie Nixon from Long Beach Container Terminal. So the shortest trip to here. And it's also great that we actually have gender parity on our panel. We have like equal representation by male and female panelists, which I think is did not happen in all of the panels today. So please welcome our panel. So my plan was to have a question targeted specifically to one person, but it doesn't mean that the others cannot talk about it. So I was kind of planning to address one person first because it's kind of closer to their area of expertise, but then the others, of course, are welcome to add their comments and their views to this. So I sort of started alphabetically. So Jack, you should be the first one. So we heard before from the CEO of your company how your company is really kind of interested in collecting data, providing more visibility on supply chains. As our topic is sustainability, and we are talking about AI and technology, could you share something about the role of data analytics in achieving supply sustainability? Like how can AI-driven insight be used to optimizing resource use and waste reduction, or how big data can help in sustainability decision-making processes.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is working, right? Yeah. Good. So hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Jack Braniff, Senior Director of Partnerships at Project 44. And yes, we heard from Jet earlier. I don't need to go too deep in Project 44 and what we do to kick things off. I will say he did sort of air out that sustainability products aren't our best-selling products. So I don't know if I can go into too much detail right off the bat there, but I think what's really what we see in terms of it driving decision making is more access to data and more access to sort of clean, reliable, and trustable data just promotes better decision making. And so where we see sort of impact in terms of sustainability, carbon emissions, it's really more focused on trying to promote overall efficiency and frankly coming back to sort of opportunity for cost savings instead of sort of more intentional actions by our customers to decrease decrease their emissions using sort of insightful information. And I'll give a couple examples here, but when we think about sort of an opportunity for major impact, we have a customer, small little customer named Coca-Cola that uses our information to track sort of their global inventory in terms of containerized ocean freight. They use that information in terms of inventory planning, sort of flagging risks for inventory in motion, communicating to their bottling plants, to their end customers when freight's going to get to those end locations. But during within the last few months, with the impacts in the Red Sea, they've been relying heavily on our product to understand what inventory is actually rerouting around the Cape of Good Hope, what the associated impacted lead times are because of that exception, and then ultimately what the predictive ETA is that Project 44 is generating. And so just briefly on that, we have at Project 44 sort of access to a massive data set, given we're tracking hundreds of thousands of containers at any point in time and have billions of data points just across sort of the overarching transportation ecosystem. So having access to that type of raw, vast information, being able to apply AI models to it, to contextualize that information, to be able to take it and understand sort of performance on specific lanes, looking at sort of other vessels that have rerouted, provide a much more accurate and reliable ETA for the associated inventory, allows a customer like Coca-Cola to say, hey, I have a pretty high degree of certainty it's going to get here on this time. Maybe I don't need to air expedite this freight to get to this bottling plant on time, given this real world exception has occurred, but I have confidence in the data that it's going to be okay, and I can mitigate, in this case, excessive spend on a much more costly mode of transportation, but as a knock-on effect has a pretty significant impact in terms of scope 3 emissions and the carbon output for getting that inventory to where it needs to be on time. So I think that's where we're seeing sort of more and more, I think, actionable examples in terms of our customer base and how leveraging big data today is actually impacting operations and sort of scope 3 emission output. I will say, though, we are investing pretty heavily, and Jet did allude to this, to more sustainability-focused products. So actually being able to provide emission benchmarking at the container level, at the truckload level, and then aggregating that information out in the form of analytics. Being quite frank, and again, Jet alluded to this, especially in the United States, there's a few early adopters, but even the customers that are working with us with those products are much more focused on high-level reporting rather than starting to use that information to drive action in terms of decisions they're making around carrier selection, route optimization, whatever it may be. I think over the next few years, we'll see more progress in that space, especially if legislation here in the US federally and also state by state continues to trend sort of the way it's going right now. But we do have a few early adopters in Europe that where regulations have a bit further ahead than here and have been leveraging this information and collecting this data for a few years. And so just one example, a major shipper, I'm not going to share the name of this one, but they have a pretty complex global supply chain, ship on like 15 to 20 different ocean lanes. And for the last 3 years, they've been tracking and measuring their emission outputs at the lane level. And I've actually started to use that information paired with performance and paired with cost to prioritize business they give to certain carriers, with sort of a weighting that they feel appropriate towards what the overall scope 3 emission sort of index is for those lanes and that provider. So I think, hopefully we continue to see sort of more and more customers and partners of ours leveraging the information and big data, to impact that type of decision making. But for the time being, even relying on decreasing costs, increasing throughput that has a positive impact is an overall good thing, and that's what technology and data can help with.
You mentioned when we talked how for some of the smaller players, this can still be too big of a monetary investment to do, but that you're expecting the prices to go down as more data is being collected and efficiency of scales kind of come up.
Yeah, I think so. So we see ourselves pretty uniquely positioned to provide accurate benchmarking here and data insights on, specifically carbon emission, because we have all the source information. If we're tracking, providing visibility and tracking a specific vessel and understand and have inputs around routing, fuel type, whatever it may be, that is a very accurate data point. It's all predicated off of sort of our core business, which is carrier connectivity and providing that level of visibility. So the barrier for entry right now is, and to have that sort of accurate, that accurate reading, it requires having that source information, and that obviously is our business model. But we're really exploring ways to even just tack on the emissions component and figure out from a costing perspective, is it additional product SKU? Is it something that is just baked in because it's meaningful? And so some of the early adopters have paid for it specifically. I suspect as we gain a larger data set, there'll be some more, I think, flexibility and just more baked into sort of what customers expect when they come to us looking for sort of overall end-to-end transportation visibility.
Anybody else wants to add something on this? No, not on the data. Okay, so Karen, when we talked, like one of the topics we discussed was the future challenges related to labor and greening transportation. And so could you share your thoughts on the skills and competencies needed for the AI-driven sustainable supply chains, and what would be, in your opinion, some of the challenges that are happening when adopting green transportation?
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Grace. So CSMI is an engineering consulting firm based out of Chicago. The company's been around since '83. I've been there since '96, so I'm completing like my 28th year. And the industry has changed. Specifically, we work in the FDA and the USDA regulated industries, and sustainability and AI is becoming like the themes. And if you read the annual reports, it's always the effort that's put forth and where they're spending their capital. So like you had said, Jack, that is going to be like, it's very high level. My firm right now is digging deep into the roots of trying to make sure that this data is being given properly and what to use with the data. So that's what we were talking about, competencies and skills. We are doing a lot of studies right now within our organization versus before we focused on processes of running your manufacturing facility more efficiently and reliable. But right now, sustainability is a big, big thing, and using AI technology or driven tools to do so is very important. So we're doing like a lot of power studies. We're doing a lot of infrastructure. We're doing a lot of water conservation, and then taking that data and putting them into actionable plans and strategies. So we divide our world with regards to the space into three things, like technical competencies and skills, strategic, and then just a collaboration. And I feel like sometimes we're like psychologists for the supply chain and for the different departments within the corporations that we work with. And the clients that we work with are mainly in manufacturing. So those are your Kraft Foods, your PepsiCo, your Frito-Lays, your Coca-Colas, General Mills. And so, like I said, their main competency is doing the manufacturing and getting products on the shelves for the consumers. So utilizing these tools and gathering this data is one thing, because that's what everyone says. We just have to keep gathering the data. And I think the AI-driven tools are helping with that. However, we're in the business of interpolating that and putting them into actual plans and strategies. So some of the data that we're working on is algorithms and statistical and how the robots are becoming more efficient. lot of labor stuff is going on as well, because you're not getting the skilled, the line workers to come to work. So then they're implementing the robotics more so. So the other part to that is the regulation and the compliance, which things are changing day by day. So for example, in California and in the state of Illinois, there's legislation that you have to reduce your carbon footprint by X amount. And, there's Electrified California plans that are going on. And how are these organizations going to be able to do this in a timely manner and be compliant and be ethical and legal and whatnot? So those are the things that we're focusing on. And quite frankly, honestly, in school, I never learned about some of these technologies like Internet of Things or blockchain. And so we're learning as well, and we're hiring younger people as well, but some of that is in theory versus like real application. So that's some of the challenges. But with that comes a lot of opportunity as well. So once we figure out for green transportation, how we're going to charge up when the raw ingredients truck delivery comes in, while they're unloading the raw ingredients to charge them up so that they can leave. So when the finished goods need to go into, get loaded back in and they're electrified up so that they can go to the various distribution. Those are challenges that we're trying to figure out. And we're growing and we're learning how to do that as we speak. So what else is there? There's also like the cost is how much do you invest in it? It's not the most cost efficient, which you're trying to do. You got to come up front with charging stations and the batteries and just the logistics and the overall organization of how you're going to put things in the supply chain. So we're figuring that out as well. But our clients are willing to start investing small on the data and the studies and stuff like that.
Thank you. And so, Bonnie, I think you're also familiar with some of these things as being in the port of Long Beach. You actually are working on the other side. You are implementing some of this electrification and dealing with automation and labor, less need for manual work. So how is the port of Long Beach dealing with these things?
Sure. Don. Oh, good. Thanks. Good afternoon. Yeah, I am the Director of Sustainability at the Long Beach Container Terminal, and that's right here in Long Beach. You, as you go on the bridge or come off the bridge, it's the terminal with the red and white cranes, and we are a fully electrified, fully automated terminal. So it has 93 cranes that are all electrified that use more than 100 million kilowatts of electricity a year. We also have 102 autonomous vehicles and the 2 largest battery exchange buildings in the world as well. So what my role is to make sure that we completely throw this over the fence and that there is not one piece of fossil fuel equipment left on the terminal before 2030. And I'm well on course to do that. So we've identified 270 pieces of rolling stock equipment that will be turned over to electric as well. And yes, we do have a lot of regulations here in California, but my view is we are in an area that these 5 communities right here that surround us, West Long Beach, Carson, Gardena, Wilmington, San Pedro, have some of the highest childhood asthma rates in the state, the highest COVID deaths in the corridors between the 710 and the 110, and then, of course, heading all the way out to Bakersfield. So it really is one of those things where this Port of San Pedro complex brings in 40% of the goods of the country. New York, New Jersey brings in 20%. So, we really have to ask ourselves from an environmental justice perspective, do these people deserve to suffer so that we could get all these goods? And that's the real task at hand. And we absolutely work very closely with all the regulators, with the community groups, with the environmental groups, with the ports to get all this done. And it's not easy. I mean, we are seeing equipment that's costing, you know, a yard tractor that would cost $100,000 normally is going up to 800,000, 900,000, close to $1 million. Well, when you do the design, you purchase the switchgear and the conduit, you do the trenching, you put in the chargers, you might have charging apparatus like arms or inductive, and then you purchase equipment. The yard tractors themselves are coming in at about 400,000. So some of that has to do with the Build America, Buy America requirements. Some of it's just one of those Sony Walkman times. Early adopters are going to pay, you know, and we're at that time. And it's fascinating for me to, you know, hear. I'm excited as well, as I've listened to many of the panels and we've talked about sustainability, and we have a packaging expert on the panel as well, because I often think of it as a packaging phenomenon. I remembered I started sustainability in 1984, 1979. I was there for 3 Mile Island, but 83, 84. So I started on the Boston Harbor Cleanup Project, and we called it sewage, you know, and then we called it sludge, and then we called it residuals, and then we called it biosolids, you know, and it really was all the same thing, you know, and so protecting the environment and looking out for people and justice has been around for a lot of years, and we just have to do it a lot faster.
Thank you. So as Bonnie mentioned, we have a packaging expert also on the panel. So so Brandon has been he's a third generation, no? Like
Yep.
so a lot of experience in the family with the packaging industry. So could you tell us a little bit about you know how integrating circular economy principles in supply chain management works from your perspective? We were talking about different new things that are happening, like with your company and your client and customers. So closing the loop, minimizing waste, and similar things.
Yeah, so our family business started back in 1970, my grandparents, and I was literally born into it. And it was kind of interesting is when I took over as president and now I own the business, I brought up the topic of sustainability about 7, 8 years ago. And my parents kind of looked at me like, yeah, we've been through this before. Like, it's a topic, it's a concern, and then it goes away. Don't worry, let's just slap some chasing arrows on it and move along. And it felt different this time. And so I made the case in the argument that I thought that this was kind of the levee had broken, that this topic wasn't going to go anywhere, and it was going to be something that we really wanted to move forward. And it was a passion project of mine as well. And so it kind of started this really interesting journey where we were kind of looking at the packaging space, and especially the beauty industry, and said, we really need to kind of bring more honesty and transparency to the conversation. There isn't a lot of data around this in this thing. It's just, let's just be real about what we know is happening. What is actually being recycled? What does sustainability really mean? And so we kind of dived into these bigger questions and then found a partner with Credo Beauty, which I still serve as their sustainable packaging expert. They gave me that title. I did not pick it. There's much smarter people on this topic than I am. But what's really interesting is we were able to build some trust and collaboration with other members of the value packaging supply chain. And what happened is we were able to create standards at Credo. So Credo's a retailer, kind of think of them like the Whole Foods of the beauty industry. So clean ingredients was kind of their focus, and then they added in these sustainable packaging standards. And I think this is a model for any industry. So if you're not a beauty, product user, I think it's still relevant. But basically, the retailer said, we're going to create these sustainable packaging guidelines that's going to affect all of the brands in our store. And they brought me on to basically advise of what's going to be like really difficult to achieve, but still kind of maybe possible if we push really hard. So we came up with these guidelines, and we basically introduced them to the brands, and I volunteered my time as a free resource to all of the different brands to help guide them to be able to accomplish these standards. And it was incredibly difficult at first. The minimum order quantities for using any amount of PCR, post-consumer recycled plastic resins, whether PET or polypropylene or whatever, was like 250,000 units, 500,000 units, depending on the type of packaging that was being used. And all of the brands in Credo are generally really small brands that want to buy 25,000 units or 50,000 units. So the whole packaging, all of our manufacturing partners, we went to them and said, hey, like we have to figure out this supply chain problem. Like we need to be able to get smaller batches of PCR resins for these different products. And they were like, no. And we're like, no, really? And so we like really dove into it and we started talking to where the recycled content is coming from and how can we have cleaner sources? Because if you have dirty recycled plastic, you can't use it. You can't make anything with it. So we just kept kind of solving problem after problem and just kept getting more and more partners in this whole process. And I'm so happy to report that 3-4 years later, actually maybe 5 years now, a minimum order quantity can go as low as 1,000 units. Like there is a ready amount of recycled resin for beauty packaging for them to be able to use what I think is a better and more sustainable material. Because obviously that whole supply demand, if there's more demand for recycled content, that means the collection is going to get better. It means less plastic in landfills and waterways and more being recycled. Is it perfect? No. Could I poke holes in it all day? Yeah. But it's better than using a bunch of virgin plastic without any alternatives. So that was just one story that I wanted to share today. And to be honest, I forgot the second part of the question. So I forgot a cup of coffee before I got up here. Yeah.
No, I mean, but basically it was kind of how can we work and see about closing the loop, kind of increasing collaboration, using collaboration to improve sustainability of supply chains.
Great, then I answered it and smarter people can talk now.
Anybody else?
I would just add, I didn't say, you know, when you look at, I do want to encourage folks, if you go on our website, you can see download these reports, LBCT website, and it's our full net zero strategy with lots of data. I'm a data geek. I love numbers and exact facts and figures. And then there's the 1-year progress report, and I'm putting out the 2-year progress report. And honestly saying what's working, what's not working, and collaboration and that what you're mentioning, it's so critical. I mean, we work very closely with the Port of Long Beach every day, and then with the 2 ports and with all of the regulators. And, you know, it's hard to be in this position, to be what I would call a success story. I mean, we have spent $2.5 billion to do this. You know, so when people ask me, what does it take to actually do this? It takes commitment, it takes financial wherewithal, it takes willpower, political willpower, you know, and it's a ton of collaboration with all the partners every day. So it's that kind of commitment to listen and to keep sludging through, you know, some tough issues. You know, that obviously we're a fully automated terminal. There are issues related to the workforce. There are issues related to many different things, and we make sure that everybody comes out whole.
So I'll come back to both you and John, because I think there are some things that you guys have to say about like financing collaboration and so on. But before we go to that, I just want also to look back, like we had heard from Jet when he was talking to Nick, how he mentioned that he met with people from Volvo and IKEA, and they were really kind of interested in sustainability, and these are both European companies. Then we heard Todd in the previous one of the previous sessions, who talked about how meeting regulation in some countries doesn't imply that you meet regulations in another country. And so we actually have here somebody who is not from US, who is coming from Europe. And we keep hearing how Europe has much stricter regulations and requirements. And so I wanted to hear a little bit from Nicole, kind of how are some different regulations in different markets impacting supply chains, and what do you think about some of these emerging regulations, especially in Europe? What are some of the positive and negative aspects of them?
Okay, so giving the European aspect, the main thing in Europe is the so-called Green Deal, which has the target to be climate neutral until 2050. So far, so good. They categorized it by industries, and if you like 11 industries, if you summarize all the laws involved, we talk about more than 120 different laws within the Green Deal. I talked to Andre from Daxel, who was on stage before, and they analyzed what is important for them. It's like more than 15 different laws. And of course, it's from the European perspective, as a company, you have to fulfill these laws. For you, like right now, it's very relaxed. But whenever you want to import into the European Union or want to work with the European Union, you also have to fulfill these laws. Another aspect, and yeah, this is the legal requirements. If you look at different stakeholders, another stakeholder are the banks, financial institutes. I talked to some of the experts, and if you want to refinance your company, you need money. What they look at is your ESG reporting. So if you're not really good, or if you just do something which is not accepted, you have to pay higher interest rates. For the beginning of the year, they set up a bond with $3 trillion just for ESG projects and ESG companies. And another thing in Europe is in the discussion is taxonomy for ESG, which means if you don't do ESG, you pay much higher taxes. Another stakeholder are, of course, consumers, customers, and NGOs. In Europe, NGOs are very strong. So, of course, they watch what you're doing. It's not that, you can announce that you're climate neutral and things like that. Companies like German companies, especially in this case, I'm from Germany. So Deutsche Bahn, the German railway, Lidl, you have some stores here, IKEA were sued because they didn't follow what they promised. So there are a lot of risk involved. It's not only financially, if you want to refinance your company, it's could be a reputation loss, but also as my last example, there is a new law. So it's an operational and a legal risk. The new law about European Union deforestation regulation, starting on the 1st of January, just 4 more months. A lot of people don't know about it. In the beginning, it is valid for 7 categories. It is soy, it's palm oil, it's beef products, it's caoutchouc, it's wood, cacao, coffee, and wood. Wood also includes pellets, paper, furniture. So for these 7 products, you need to have, first of all, you need to have geodata, which sounds not that difficult. Yesterday, I talked to a friend and he said, yeah, that cannot be that difficult. Friend is sitting there. But we're talking about Africa, for example, coffee beans from Africa. So that means it's really difficult to get the data. We're talking about traceability. Ron will be tomorrow leading the panel or being in the panel of traceability. And then we will hear how difficult it is to apply that. In Europe, you need to make a statement which is legally binding and to document everything. So these are like really tough requirements to fulfill. And I talked to one of the biggest retailers and they said for the private label, they will have 8 to 9 million data sets per year, which means you need to have the capability to store everything that because you have to prove that. And the fines will be, they didn't define the fines, but they will be a percentage from the turnover. And the next thing is you personally will be liable. So me as the owner of a supermarket, I can go to jail. Beside that, I need to take the product out of my market and lose the whole turnover of the product. So coming back to what Nick this morning said about the 3 Ps of in the supply chain, I think honestly, right now there's a little imbalance between people, profit, and planet. But of course, yeah, we need to do something. Thank you.
And so it seems that although we say how Europe is doing great and much better, it may not be kind of so good for some of the companies who have to actually operate there or work with Europe.
Yeah, especially it will be a problem for the smaller ones. So the bigger ones, as you mentioned, of course, they have the data, they have the departments to fulfill the requirements. But if you're like a coffee cooperative somewhere, again, in Africa, in Peru, the question is, are you willing to do that? Because there are estimations that the prices for coffee in Europe will double because people are like producers are not willing to fulfill all the requirements.
And so you mentioned like the 3Ps, and so all of these things that we want to implement come with significant cost in some cases. So Jean was mentioning this morning how there is a huge difference in cost of trucks, like if we compare the regular combustion engines versus electric versus hydrogen, how the price just doubles as you go from one category to the next. And Bonnie, like under your leadership, the Port of Long Beach did quite a lot in making things greener and moving towards being risk neutral. And so, can you tell us something about how is all of this financed?
Cost. The fuel, let's talk about the fuel, for example. The fuel, right now in this aspect of the supply chain, the goods movement, you're dealing with everybody's talking about hydrogen and it's a very good fuel. However, for most of us right now today, it's 4 times the price and we can't really get our hands on the distribution of it, and you can't get blue and green hydrogen. I mean, that requires renewables. And so we look at in just this this life cycle, this aspect of the life cycle, the ships, the vessels, the trucks, the trains, the tugs, and the cargo handling equipment at the terminals. And my personal belief is that, for the stationary equipment, to the extent that we can electrify that, we should rely on the stationary grid and for the short haul things too, things like tugs. But for the long haul, like for ships, locomotives, long haul drayage, they will need either e-methanol or ammonia or hydrogen. And right now we're not bunkering that. We hope to be in the future, and we're still dealing with issues related to safety, and cost is just a huge factor. Like when we talk to all of the retailers, and I come from this place. I spent 13 years at HP and then at Walmart and at Mattel, and led the Walmart consortium with 100 of the largest suppliers. And even in the conversations we're having with the large companies like the Walmarts and the Targets and the IKEAs and the Wayfairs, and they're basically saying, we're not going to pay more money. We're not going to pay a premium for you because you are electrifying everything, because you're buying hydrogen, because you're doing this. That's how we expect you to deliver our business. And these are challenges, because when I just got done telling you that $100,000 yard tractor is now 800,000 to $1 million, it's like, how does a business look at that ROI, and how do they capitalize on that? And so we're doing everything from looking at, I think this is where the government really comes in. I'm excited about what's happened over the last 3 to 4 years. We've seen billions and billions of dollars hit the market, not just from private equity or venture capital, where I think there's trillions, there's billions that the government has put out. And this is where the government's role is the best, because we need to be incentivized. We need that R&D budget. We as early adopters are hitting all kinds of bugs when we're trying to connect this equipment, or it's not quite ready. So this is a perfect time for the government to step in and really incentivize action and change. And we've been excited about that. We're trying to raise $250 million, and we've already successfully, with the port as our partner, raised 100 million. And we're waiting on another 100 million now. So we believe we're almost there. We will truly be the first true net zero terminal, but it's taken $2.6 billion to do it. So it's really important to know that it costs to do this, but it also costs not to do it.
Of course. And I think this is a perfect kind of intro to have some questions for John. So your company is investing in diverse technology companies, and it's kind of the blend of expertise across government, education, private sector. So what do you think, how can collaboration and partnership help create sustainable ecosystems, and kind of how will these different strong partnership help? Can we see the role of technology in these things and so on?
Yeah, well, so Bonnie hit it out of the park. Sunstone Management is a private capital management investment company. We partner with government, and whether it's on economic development programs like the federal EB5 programs, it could be state small business credit initiatives. We're the venture partner that helps activate these government programs and partner with private capital. I spent 20 years in government, and I spent the last 6 years as the economic development director for the city of Long Beach before starting Sunstone Advisors, which is our SEC registered investment advisor. And the secret that most private equity doesn't want you to know is that the biggest venture capital investor in the history of the world is the United States federal government. Our economy at $23 trillion in GDP, our California economy at 3.5, almost 3.6 trillion, is powered by government investment. Government and the public sector puts more money into the economy. And over the last 200 years, the United States federal government has been the biggest investor in emerging technologies. So if it's healthcare or transportation or energy, aerospace, California, Southern California economy has been powered by those contracts. There's even a CEO that a lot of you know who complains about the government all the time, whose companies were all built by the government, whether it was the DoD or it was California, solar tax credits. Even the biggest entrepreneurs, the richest people in the world, don't want you to know that the economy is a public-private partnership. And so on the private side, private capital, Sunstone and my partners have identified that we don't want to do anything else except solve the world's biggest challenges. And the government is oftentimes leading and very much needed to provide a lot of that early stage funding, research and development through our universities, through these government grants, the IRA, the huge Inflation Reduction Act bill, which is now making its way through California, through the California Energy Commission, and is coming through grants into companies, small businesses now, like Electric, who's out here. And the reason that Sunstone is raising a climate tech fund around goods movement is because this is the biggest contributor to climate change. And since we want to kill climate change, we want to invest in those companies that right now are doing things right now that can act quickly and incrementally, like Electric, who's in our portfolio, to convert and retrofit existing technology. So one of the biggest challenges I think we're facing, other than cost, and we need that government subsidy, we need it, and we still get it in aerospace, we still get it in healthcare, we still get it in energy every day. But we need it in goods movement and supply chain because you have transportation, so you have vehicles, you have sources of fuel, so energy. You also have distribution, so warehousing and the facilities that house those goods, the physical goods. And then you have logistics, which we look at as the information technology that ties it all together, the stuff that Project 44 we're talking about. So the challenge is that that's an ecosystem. So you cannot invest in one part of the ecosystem without addressing other parts that, say, your transportation company relies on, because your fleet owner needs a charging station. And if the real estate owner who owns the warehouse or distribution facility doesn't have a charging station or a hydrogen fueling station, then the fleet owner can't transition. So this is where we love to be. We love to be in partnership with government. The private capital, the government capital have to think of creative ways to work together. It can be at the fund level, or it can be at the deal level. And working together, public officials, private equity investors like us, We need more bridgers. We need more people doing what Brandon talked about. That is brilliant. That is collaboration among many partners, making tiny incremental changes constantly and quickly. To just 3 to 5 years ago, you couldn't have envisioned what they're now doing that they said was not financially feasible. The consumer won't pay, but by doing it and by collaborating, I think there's nothing that we can't accomplish.
Thank you. I think what you were saying also helps in answering. We got a question on Aurora asking who is investing private capital in supply chain technology to address climate change. So I think we heard about somebody who is doing something like that. So we still have some time for questions from the audience, but before we turn to the questions, I would just like each of you to say some final words, the message that you would like to give to our audience here. So is there like some final?
Yeah, I'll just say, from my perspective and working in the industry I do, it's really encouraging just to see the continued investment in supply chain technology and specifically more access to data to make just more conscious decisions sort of across a company's entire decision-making flow. So I'm just really encouraged to see more adoption, more access to information, and that bar lower as there's more and more players that can use this data effectively.
I'm impressed with how we're all similarly connected, and then you can kind of transition from each person on what they're working on and how they're trying to make a difference. And that's probably the power of this summit is doing so, and just getting more interested in each piece of what's going on, whether it's just here nationally or globally, like Dr. Mao.
I'm probably most excited next about in the packaging supply chain is ripping down the veil of secrecy that's existed forever so that there's really clear transparency, where the raw materials are coming from, who's manufacturing around the world, what's the carbon impact, all the different reporting. I'm excited for that veil to be ripped down.
I'm super excited about the opportunities we have now, and specifically in Long Beach and Los Angeles and California to lead the next 100 years of the world economy, to improve it, to improve quality of life, increase economic opportunity, and do that in a way that is ultimately good for the world, good for the environment, because climate is a massive threat to our environment, but more so even to the California economy. You're seeing it just destroy economies around the world. It's creating, mass migration. It's creating all kinds of challenges that destabilize society. So we have that opportunity, and everybody in this room is in Long Beach, California right now. You're at the center of not only the research, the development, the industry, but the availability of capital, which is the fuel for this. So whether it's government or it's private, we are really, really fortunate to be here.
I think what is really exciting is the change and the transformation to the need of doing something. I think that's what Brandon said in the beginning, like talking to his parents. It was a nice thing. It was something you would do accompanying the business, but focusing really on the business. And right now, especially in Europe, you cannot be successful without the environment, without ESG. So I think that's an important requirement, and we have to work with it.
I'm excited about just hearing, the commitment to transparency, because I feel that we need to open the black boxes. Like, I'm a believer in the use of all these technologies, whether they be crypto, gaming, robotics, AI, learning platforms, augmented reality, virtual reality. All of these things are necessary for us to accelerate sustainability and advance human rights. And we've got to do the two simultaneously. When we look at this global South, the Southern Hemisphere, we have done a tremendous injustice to them, much like the surrounding communities that suffer from poor air quality. I mean, we have reparations, we have amends to make to half of this planet for having mined it, deforested it, extracted it at every level. And I'm excited and nervous, for the future generations, to have to clean up our mess and move quickly. And so I am committed. I'm teaching sustainable supply chain, next fall here at USC. And for me, I can't move fast enough with the students to just say, like, we got a lot of work to do. We have to make it all transparent. We've got, in a short amount of time, we've known 40 years ago, all this data that has gotten us to here, and we've moved quite slowly. And while I'm at a place that I got there and I said, wow, you guys actually did this? Private equity owned, by the way, you did this? This is a success story? What did it take? Who was involved? How did this happen? And I actually am working at a place where it's possible. So that gets me geared up and gets me excited every day. And I know it's possible. So I have hope. And at the same time, I will say, be radically pessimistic, be radically optimistic, and be radically realistic.
And to follow up on what Karen said before, when I saw the names and backgrounds of the people of this panel, I was, okay, how will I make this work? Because they come from such a different industries and backgrounds and companies. But I think the story kind of flew quite well, because the problems all of these different areas are facing are connected, and we have to work together across all of them to make things better and sustainable. So we have time for some questions. Any questions for our panelists?
Bonnie, as the terminal is investing over $2 billion in sustainability, and we're seeing now larger TU ships coming online for the next 36 months and beyond. The issue of early adopters, have you found that there's a balancing act that you need to play to obviously take care of the needs now and tomorrow, but not do it to a point where you need to now re-adopt and update again in the next, say, 5 to 10 years from now, because a new line of ship can come online with a new maritime laws.
I think, we're all sort of working our own races. At the terminal level, we're looking at all the cargo handling equipment and all the rolling stock. And there's no doubt in 5 to 10 years, we may turn around and say, hydrogen is a better bet for some of this equipment. And therefore, we need a hydrogen plant, or we need access. And I think with the ships, look, for the long haul, as I mentioned, they really have 3 choices today. They have hydrogen, e-methanol, and ammonia. You see the Japanese placing a pretty big bet on ammonia. You see the Chinese and many of the countries investing in e-methanol. But we have to bunker it here, right? We have to provide it to them. And then hydrogen, I think all of us are placing a big bet on it for the long haul thing. So I believe that the sad thing is about ships. I mean, they are a 20, 25-year life cycle. So there's no doubt that, if they decide to do hydrogen later, it's going to be new ships that they have to build, and those are expensive. So it's why we all need to work together. I mean, I must say that of the 2.5 billion that we spent, the port put in 1.5 billion of that to prepare the ground for it. So it is a collaboration, and the port is our landlord. We are their tenant.
And our clock is showing 0 minutes left and 0 seconds left. So thank you all for being here with us and for patience, and please give a round of applause.
Let's go.